Hello and welcome back to Movie Remake Time, a Filmmaker's Compass podcast. I am CP with my amazing co-host D-Man, and we are going to task ourselves with the ever difficult question of asking who did it better between remakes, reboots, and sequels. And this is actually a first for us, isn't it, D-Man?
Yeah, I'm really excited. You know, I feel like every episode I'm really excited, which is a good thing. Hopefully that's contagious and all you listeners are excited too. But this week, we are actually picking up a remake that released this week.
You can go see it in the theaters.
Yeah, you can actually go to the theaters and see this movie. So it's really fun because I'm curious now to see what people think, because I feel like this is going to be, on people's minds, a topic of conversation. This is something
Absolutely.
that when you go to a gathering or a party or something, so, hey, have you seen this movie? And this is, kind of part of the reason why we wanted to do this segment of the podcast was we noticed there's a lot of remakes coming out, reboots. And we wanted to talk about how do they do? How do they compare to the originals? And we have a great one of really good discussion today. So if you're ready, I'll just go ahead and introduce it.
Break it down, man.
We are doing Space Jam. So
Space Jam.
Yep. If you're ready, we're going to compare Michael Jordan and LeBron James, which is we're going to compare their acting careers, not their basketball careers.
Yeah, you hear that comparison all the time, not normally in their, how they are in front of the camera. But hey, first time for everything.
Yeah, so I'm really excited because I don't think, I know there's a lot of YouTube videos and other people on podcasts and stuff talking about this movie, but I mean, man, I can't tell you how many times I've been somewhere debating who's better, Michael Jordan or LeBron James. And now we're going to do it with Space Jam. So I'm really pumped. I'll throw it over to you. Go ahead and kind of introduce the movies. Let us know what's going on here, why they're rebooting it, and we'll figure out what's going on.
So if you're an 80s kid or a 90s kid, you've seen the original Space Jam, and you probably love it, right? Looks like this, 1996, starring Michael Jordan and Bugs Bunny.
Yeah,
directed by John Flicka.
He got a credit in the opening credits. Bugs Bunny did.
He's actually right there on the DVD too.
I know, it's amazing. That was like, when I was watching it, I was like, that's so cool that they just went ahead there and had fun with it.
And then the 2021 one was directed by Malcolm Lee, starring, again, Bugs Bunny, this time partnered with LeBron James. That's
now, here's the thing
we need to talk about.
They actually call this, what is it? They call it Space Jam, a new era or something.
New legacy.
A new legacy. And it is, they make mention, there's some nods to the first one. Very slight. So I was hard pressed to say if this was a full reboot or technically like a sequel.
I feel like it was more a reboot. Obviously, I felt like the only reference that came was when they recruited Lola Bunny in the sequel, and she was talking about teaming up with a basketball superstar.
Yeah.
She kind of like she said something along the lines like, exactly. So
I got a hint that they were kind of toying with the concept that like this was all happening kind of in the same like meta universe, but not really. Like you said, I think it's a full-on reboot. This is a chance to kind of take that same concept and reapply it with, a new kind of digital overlay, and then you swap Michael Jordan with LeBron James. So, all right, first of all, let's just go ahead and throw it out there. I mean, what are your initial thoughts on this remake? Because reading about it, one of the interesting things that I didn't know was apparently there was a planned sequel all the way back in the 90s, but Michael Jordan had only agreed to sign on for one movie. And once they found out that he wasn't going to do the next one, it got canceled. But I don't know if you know this, but there were all kinds of concepts floating around. It was like skate jam, golf jam, like all these different variations of what Space Jam was, but with like other major athletes. Like, hey, let's see if we could do a golf version with like Tiger Woods.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, and I think that ended up kind of evolving into the what kind of failed in the box office, the Looney Tunes Back in Action movie, which actually, as a big Looney Tunes fan, I loved it.
Oh, nice.
The original Space Jam is iconic. If you're a 90s kid, you grew up watching it. I mean, shout out to my friend Jared. I think once a week, every summer of our childhood lives, we get together and watch Space Jam because it was amazing.
Now, can we acknowledge, I mean, at this time in the late 90s, I mean, literally anything Michael Jordan is touching turns to gold.
Oh,
like,
I mean,
if you think about the actual concept of the original Space Jam and you think about going to a pitch meeting and being like, hey, we want to get Michael Jordan to play basketball with the Looney Tunes and like recruit these other NBA players. I mean, the only way this all happens is if Michael Jordan like buys in. And apparently he did. I mean, I wish I could have been there when they pitched him. I highly doubt he was the one that was like, you know,
I want to team up with Bugs Bunny and make a movie.
Yeah, I mean, again, I was doing a little research, you know, kind of reading up on both the movies, and like, I guess there was a sports commercial called Hair Jordan, where it was just a commercial, but like he partners with Bugs Bunny, and that was the somewhat inspiration to be like, hey, we could do like a whole vehicle here that kind of expands on that gimmick.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense, right? That way, this concept's not totally coming out of abstract. There is a slight proof of concept, and
yeah, it was very receptive. Sense. Again,
I always wondered how that came about.
Yeah, everything Michael Jordan touched turned to gold. So you put him in a commercial with Bugs Bunny, gold. Then they're like, let's make a movie out of this, you know, 1 minute commercial, gold. And the thing is, you know, it's interesting because, you know, obviously Michael Jordan and LeBron James are both semi playing themselves, right? They both have opening montages with allusions to their careers and real life events, but they both have fictional families, and they're not playing like themselves 100%.
I doubt Michael Jordan really lived in that average suburban house like they depict in the film.
Yeah, I love how, what's his name in the movie? Is it Sal? What's his name?
Sal, yeah.
Yeah. He like literally comments on how nice the house is.
Stan? It's Stan, right?
It's Stan. Yeah, he comments on how nice the house is. But I mean, to us, you know, average people thinking about how much money Michael Jordan must have, I mean, clearly that's not his home.
Yeah, right.
You know, like his neighbors like drive by and they're like, hey, Michael. I was like, this is why actors and celebrities live in gated communities, because they don't want to be bothered by the dog walker. So anyway, I just kind of wanted to preface like where this all comes from. And then obviously LeBron James, you know, we know he has so much respect for Michael Jordan. He grew up loving Space Jam. And the concept had been floating around for years about some sort of reboot or whatever. And he decided he would sign on. And that was something he wanted to do. And he was 100% in, which was pretty cool, I guess, considering how busy of a guy he must be. Mm-hmm. So pretty neat. And that's really the premise for how these movies came about. And I only bring that up because most movies, right, you're like, oh, it's a genre film. It's an action adventure. You know, we've talked about like Terminator 1 versus Terminator 2. And you're like, I know why those movies got made. You're like, you look at this concept, you're like, how did this happen? And it did happen now twice. So I want to throw it over to you. Let's go ahead and dive into culture. But I also want to get your first impression, like your thoughts. What did you think of the remake? Man.
Just throw me under the bus. Obviously, you know, I think that the stakes are very high. The first one is a huge cult classic. And I was actually want to ask, I'll ask you a question when I'm done about, you know, that in its own right. This has been hyped for a long time. I know there was talk about doing one with maybe Kobe Bryant years ago. The fact is, we've been waiting for Space Jam 2 for a really long time. It's here. It's been hyped for so long. It was really something that we had been looking forward to for a long time. And I just want to draw that out for the point that this was a very hard target to begin with. But me, I freaking hated it, dude.
No way.
freaking hated it. I actually had to stop it about 3 times and just be like, is this what is this the world that we're living in where this is Space Jam for me? And
It's weird.
It's kind of a depressing moment.
It's weird you say that because I have been anticipating this episode for a while. And a lot of it, like you said, is because we kind of haven't had an impression of how this would go. Now, that being said, I don't know if it's because the bar was set so low, but I actually enjoyed it.
No, okay. Well, so one of the things I wanted to ask you before we kind of dive into this further, in your opinion, obviously, our listeners know that we grew up outside of Chicago. Especially you, were huge Chicago Bulls fans. I mean, you used to have a autographed Michael Jordan jersey above your bed.
My dad still has it.
Did we love the first Space Jam? Like, were we biased? Was it the bubble that we were in? Was it our own, obsession with Jordan that was part of it? Or, and I mean, audience, chime in. What did you guys think? Were you as big a Space Jam fans as us living out in Portland or wherever?
I'm sure like there's a bias to, if you're a Michael Jordan fan, you're probably more likely to enjoy the film. Obviously, if you were, one of his rivals or, a fan of a rival team, you might not like it as much. But I mean, Michael Jordan's appeal was universal, which we've known that. And, you still see it with like The Last Dance that just came out in 2020. I mean, he still has some sort of magnetic pull over the public and our culture at large. And I think that definitely plays into Space Jam here. But I also want to say, like, no, there's a certain charm to the original Space Jam that is hard to hate on. Like, it's almost like Michael Jordan, like I said, is kind of like playing himself. And let's face it, like, he's not even doing that particularly well, right? Like, he's Michael Jordan, but like you could tell he's not an actor and he's just in these scenarios that he's kind of like comfortable to be in. But once you look at like the Looney Tunes, they get the other NBA players to buy in. Danny DeVito is the villain. They have all these, kind of great songs and all this stuff. I think there's almost a campy charm to the movie. Now, it doesn't look campy in terms of production value. The drawing, the animation, and the filming itself is not subpar really at all. It's basic, but not in a campy way. But the movie has like that campy charm where you're like, I don't know why this is a thing, but I kind of like it. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I felt. And that's how I felt watching it again today. Even as an adult, obviously there's a nostalgia factor that kicks in for me. Obviously, I can still quote the movie. I sing the songs. Like, I know the stuff because I had it on VHS. I've seen Space Jam a ton of times. Mm-hmm. But even then, like, I could see where it has like some innate special quality because it's so over the top and kind of ridiculous. You're like, I don't even know how this happened.
Fair enough. So I guess there's a lot to talk about here. I thought one of the shortcomings in the sequel was the decision to take the Looney Tunes out of their element, right?
Okay.
The first Space Jam kind of is really playing off that concept kind of pioneered during Who Framed Roger Rabbit, right? Of mixing live action and animated. And Michael Jordan goes into the animated world where he becomes a real person and learns to, embrace the defined physics of Looney Tune land. I thought that was better because the Looney Tune characters were the characters that we've known them to be for 80-something years, right?
Yeah.
I thought that in this one, first of all, when LeBron goes to Looney Tune Land, he himself becomes a cartoon.
Right.
Which was a big different from the first one where...
Yeah, Michael Jordan is never a cartoon. Or maybe they have like one... Do they have one shot or something?
There's that one where it's kind of animated where he stretches his arm, but he's supposed to be still Jordan. He's never like becomes a full-on cartoon. And I thought the biggest mistake was when they took the Looney Tune characters and brought them into 3D. Because that's not who those characters are.
Yeah, I mean, they've always been two-dimensional. This is probably the first time, other than like either concept art or some sort of special thing, where they've been in 3D. I mean, they haven't been on the big screen very much. I will say though that the animation of them in 3D was not poor.
No, it's good. I'm just saying that. I mean, these are two-dimensional characters. We're used to seeing them in 2D. I don't know why there is the decision to almost throw them through the Pixar model,
Yeah, I don't know why. I mean, I guess to keep things fresh, to up the ante a little bit, to give you something, kind of some eye candy visually. I mean, what really stood out to me was when you look at the story of these two movies, right? Plot wise, they move on the same path, right? You have an NBA star who ends up going to Toonland, and then they have to play basketball to save the day. But the actual mechanisms that get them there are very different. Michael Jordan is having like a crisis of character, and it mirrors his real life crisis of character, where he's playing baseball when, right, he technically should be playing basketball, and everybody else can see it, but he's going through kind of this chapter in his life. Well, if you look at the mechanism for what gets him to Looney Tunes land, in the original, the Looney Tunes have the crisis, right? They're the ones that have to go find basketball players to compete in this game. And they go find, well, because the guy had challenged them to basketball and they went and stole all the NBA players' talent, the Looney Tunes were like, well, who's left? And it ends up that
the best basketball player in the world still has his talent.
Because he's playing baseball. They didn't know to go steal his basketball talent. So he's available, free agent, baby. And Michael Jordan steps in. And the whole idea is that he's there to kind of help save the day and save the Looney Tunes. Where if you look at the mechanisms in the new one, it's LeBron's son who is not having a crisis of character, but he's not living his true self. And that's because of his, dad's shadow looming large and not being able necessarily to step into his own shoes. But the mechanism that gets them there is that, what's his name? Algae Rhythm, algorithm. He apparently just wants respect as an algorithm. And that is purely 100% just a plot device. Same thing like, what's his name? In the first one, Danny DeVito's character, he's like, oh, we just need attractions. You're like, that's simply a plot device. So whatever. I don't think one's better than the other. One of them, it's like an alien planet. They need an amusement park ride for the other aliens. They're like, let's get Michael Jordan. I don't know why that makes any sense. This one, he's like, I want respect. So he's like, he makes a movie pitch to LeBron James, who rejects it, and he gets like super depressed and then steals his son, and they like have this game. So the whole thing with the Looney Tunes, in a way, feels more secondary, like almost like LeBron's stuck with the Looney Tunes because, I don't know, he couldn't get these other awesome characters, even though they
and he says that. Yeah.
They attempt to do it, but for some reason they can't get any of them, which doesn't make any sense because half of the characters, most of them even, end up in the audience at the freaking game.
Iron Giant, Superman, Batman, all the ones that LeBron talks about.
I guess they didn't want to play basketball. So like, I don't know. To me, I think where there's a disconnect is like the Looney Tunes feel secondary. And even though LeBron empowers them to be themselves, and they rise to the occasion as the Looney Tunes, which is great. That disconnect for about a third of the movie
is very kind apparent.
That's where I feel like it was a little bit disjointed. Although it was a lot of fun. If you're a fan of movies, Warner Brothers is, kind of diving into some of their properties for, nostalgia purposes and some Easter eggs and stuff. I didn't find that annoying. I found it fun.
There's just a lot. There's almost too many, I felt at times.
It was more so just that section felt disjointed. Like you said, like LeBron was like a cartoon for a majority of it. They're like going through the movies and you're like,
weirdly enough, that was actually my favorite part of the movie. You know, when they run into Superman and when Wile E. Coyote is, you know, hanging out with the War Boys in Mad Max World. Like, that was my favorite part of the movie. You know, there were good references. I thought there were some funny parts.
Yeah, they were fun.
And the Looney Tunes were behaving like the Looney Tune characters that they are. I thought it was when I got to the basketball game that I was actually more disappointed personally. I was just like, you know, maybe it's because the game didn't have the same stakes that it did in the first one, where it's very clear Looney Tunes lose, they're slaves. You know, Jordan loses, he's signing autographs all day and losing in one-on-one. Like, those are clear, you know, stakes laid out for the audience, where maybe in the new one they're a little more ambiguous at times. I don't know.
Yeah, and then the other thing too, I did want to note, not that it wasn't fun or cartoonish, because we are talking about the Looney Tunes here, but you know, in the new one, they also don't actually play basketball. It's like it's a game designed by LeBron James' son in the movie. And, you know, essentially it's, you know, basketball with like style points and different things, but they're not playing actual basketball.
That's a good point.
So that definitely changed the dynamic. And I mean, they work it into the film because LeBron has trouble with it at first, and then he sort of embraces it and is like, well, if that's how we're going to do it, then let's go full Looney Tunes and just get crazy. And, you know, he kind of goes all in. So they use it as a plot device, which is fine. It's just that, you know, I think when you're talking about stakes, you know, in a regular basketball game, it's just very clear. Win the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, you know, when one team's up like 1,039 points to like 250, you're like, I mean, like at a certain point, you're like, I mean, this is all just made up now.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
Like, hey, I mean, as quickly as you can score points, I guess, but like, how come one dunk can't be worth 1,000? You know, if it was that good.
No, fair enough.
So then you're like, I don't know, like, I'm not sure. You know, even it, like to me, noticing it like later in the game, like earlier, someone would dunk and they'd get like 250 style bonus. And then later they would dunk and it was 2 points. And I was like, well, how does this even work?
Mm-hmm.
You know, do they not get style points because they already did that dunk? Or like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how it works.
True. A couple other thoughts I wanted to ask you about. Mm-hmm. Obviously, music plays a huge part in the original Space Jam. What were your thoughts on the track of the remake?
Well, so first of all, yeah, the original Space Jam soundtrack is iconic. Most of the songs still get played. Yeah, they still get played at sports stadiums. They still get played in any sort of reference to like Space Jam, Michael Jordan, anything like that. I mean, they're very recognizable even to this day. Now, granted, the new movie does have a couple instances where they do like maybe a stinger throwback to some of those older songs from the first movie. But the soundtrack itself was not nearly as memorable, not nearly as catchy, and it didn't play quite as much of a role. Like I remember in the first movie, they have an entire scene where it's like Basketball Jones.
Yeah.
And the song itself became like part of this segment of the movie. And like Basketball Jones now is associated with, you know, when somebody kind of goes cold or like loses their touch.
Yeah.
And it like brought up this whole thing. And I don't know, it's hard not to just get so amped up when you hear that music and all this. And they went for a much more like modern soundtrack than the new one. Now that might resonate better with, you know, like maybe kids, fans of Fortnite. I don't know. But it didn't with me. So
okay.
That was something that I'd have to give the edge to the original. But you know, one of the things that I actually did like as a plot device was the way they involved video games. Video games are like a huge part of not only our online culture at the moment, because now not only do people play video games, but they watch people play video games. So there's kind of like a whole meta thing going on here. And not only that, you know, kids like love these video games. Like to the degree it's almost hard to get them off. And it's funny because like that's probably been said about every generation of kid with like any game console ever. But like, you know, now there's you know, the gaming like the gaming industry. I mean, it's so big. They make so much money. They're doing all these different skins, and they have, you know, music. They bring on stars. They're, you know, you think about Fortnite incorporates, like, you know, Marvel characters, Batman, like all these big properties are coming into the games. And I thought it was smart to a certain degree, because as kind of, you know, I guess Looney as the entire concept is in both movies, I don't think it's any weirder to have this be like a server verse. I mean, I don't know, it's all made up, right? So it just felt to me like they were a little bit catering to their audience of the time, and that audience is most likely younger people of today, and that's what they connect with. So they kind of leaned into that, and they're like, you know, that's what we're going to go with.
Yeah.
The tech
Fair
angle.
enough.
And, you know, that was something that I didn't mind. I thought, hey, I mean, you know, you're making Space Jam. Just lean into whatever you want to do and have fun with it. Get as crazy as you want. So I don't know. What were your thoughts on that? Do you think from a story point, they missed the mark there? Like, was that too ridiculous for you, or?
No. I think my issue with the story with this one is kind of two things. And you already touched on it. The fact that the original Space Jam could be tied into this actual greater Michael Jordan personal arc really framed the story nicely. Additionally, they took that story and applied it to the greater NBA, right? In the sense that we see like Vlade Divac scared to go take the court. And,
yeah, they put on the gas mask.
We're watching Patrick Ewing and Charles Barkley deal with this world where, you know, they can't play basketball anymore. And I thought that was really smart. And it kind of made this Looney Tune game from a story perspective have much greater implications. This one is so isolated really to this kind of, in many ways, LeBron and LeBron's son kind of struggle that it didn't feel like it had the stakes to me. I don't think that there was a problem taking the video game approach. I mean, as you mentioned, there's not a set of rules in terms of lining up.
Either one, really.
Yeah, but for the most part, I didn't really have a problem with that. I thought it was more the issue that the other one, they make it clear that this game ties better into the greater world, whereas this one, Ali G says something about how everyone who turned in for the game is going to be stuck there forever, but it's not quite the same.
Well, one of the interesting things, so like the mega plot device in the new one, A New Legacy, is the father-son dynamic. Now, I just wanted to throw this to you because this popped right into my head. But I mean, is this not the plot for Hook?
True. Yeah.
It literally is. You have a dad who's like not living up to his fatherly obligations. The kid is stolen away. They play baseball in that. And
that's a good point.
Like he has to go back with all these like crazy characters and learn how to be the person he was supposed to be. And, you know, they do all that stuff. And I was like, dang, this is basically like Hook, but with like a twist.
That's you just summed up the movie. It's Hook.
So, I mean, the father-son dynamic, I don't think it's bad because essentially, right, they already lay out where it's going to go. Like the son says, like, I don't get to do me, right? Like, I don't get to be myself. I have to, you know, kind of live up to whatever your expectations are of me. And so right away, you know, obviously where this movie's going is however it gets there, they're going to prove that, you know, the best solution here is to allow that person to be themselves. And they do it, thankfully, not through the father-son dynamic. They do it through the Looney Tunes, which at least makes them completely relevant to the story, right? The Looney Tunes try to be basketball players and emulate LeBron James to disastrous effect. And only when he realizes that in a game decided by style points, you got to let the Looney Tunes, you got to unleash them. You got to let them go off. And when he does that, he realizes that, you know, hey, that's how everybody thrives, is when you be yourself. And that's the lesson of the movie, and to LeBron and his son and all that. But yeah, it was just, I don't know. It was interesting because it really wasn't, to me, the same story. That whole father-son dynamic and what they were doing, and they was just different. You know, where it's not, I guess I'm just saying it's not like a shot for shot remake. So, when we look at something like the effects, then I know you mentioned obviously the Looney Tunes turn into 3D, and it is again used as a plot device because as soon as they win the game, they're reverted back to their selves, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as far as effects go, there's a lot of effect shots in really both of them. Probably the first one, especially for the time it was in. In the 90s, you're like, I only what you said it yourself. Roger Rabbit is like the only other movie that's even done that.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot of effect shots. And the new one had a lot of effect shots, but nothing really stood out to me in either film as bad. I actually thought they both looked pretty good. I mean, even the original one back from 1996 still holds up pretty well.
There's one shot that looks really kind of cheesy. I think it's when Stan gets flattened and they blow him back up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because it's that early kind of
like 3D.
It looks like the original Toy Story more in terms of the animation style.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that's the only one I can think of. I mean, this one obviously looks great. Obviously, it's state-of-the-art visual effects. The fact that Lebron James and Bugs Bunny are world jumping through, and they're putting all these Looney Tune characters in classic films like Casablanca and things. Like, they have a lot of fun with it at Warner Brothers, and it looks really good. You can't fault them for the visuals. I mean, it looks great.
Yeah, I mean, even the way they incorporate other properties. I mean, they were actually using clips from those movies.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of superimposing Looney Tunes over either certain characters or in certain spots.
In the Goon Squad, as opposed to the Monstars, the Monstars were just animated. The Goon Squad actually has, these much more dynamic characters that kind of evolve and have these superpowers, and they, more Marvel-esque type villains that they're facing, and that's kind of cool, and it looks great.
Yeah, I thought the nothing. Yeah, effects wise, nothing really stood out. So I gotta ask, hey, I mean, is the deciding factor here? Is it Bill Murray?
I mean, I think part of it is the fact that, and this is one of the things I was thinking of, right? They always talk about how kids' movies, the jokes are written for the parents and the characters on the screen are written for the kids, right? You think about Toy Story is a great example,
Yeah.
And in the first Space Jam, they do that so well. And Bill Murray is a huge part of it, right? But even more than that, right? There's these lines where there's always one that the psychiatrist asks Patrick Ewing if he has any other performance issues.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And like, these are jokes not for children. These are jokes
Right.
for their parents. And watching this, when we rewatch the original Space Jam, there's tons of things that you can laugh about. I didn't feel that there were as many of those grown-up jokes in this one. I felt that there were more references, Game of Thrones, The Matrix, things that I don't think kids necessarily know what they are. Those references were for us, but there aren't the witty lines of dialogue and the comedic jokes for us in the same way that there is in the first
I think
one.
my favorite joke in the new one, though, is when they bring. So, spoiler alert. I guess, yeah, we probably should have said at the top. But if you haven't seen this movie, hey, I'm going to spoil something right now, which is they actually do this kind of gag where they're like, we found Michael Jordan.
Oh,
and
best joke in the movie.
Yeah, for sure. They bring him in and they play like the Bulls intro music, and you're like, oh my God, like here it is, the Michael Jordan cameo. We all wondered if it was going to happen. And then it ends up being Michael B. Jordan, the actor, Black Panther, Michael B. Jordan. And it was the best joke in the movie, though, is when, so I forget who says it, but someone turns and they're like, you couldn't get Michael A. Jordan. Like you had to get Michael B. Jordan. And that whole gag was, perfect, because obviously not only would that work if there had never been an original Space Jam, just because we all know who Michael Jordan is, but because there was that original one, they really kind of fed into our perception of like, hey, are they ever going to reference that directly? And that was probably, other than, like we said, there was like a Lola Bunny reference, and they wear like the original Toon Squad jerseys initially, things like that. Mm-hmm. That acknowledged the first one, but not directly. This was probably the closest thing to being like, hey, Michael Jordan. So, all right, we bring him up again here, Michael Jordan. And this is the way I started it, but I got to ask you, Michael Jordan or LeBron James? Who did it better?
And I mean, this is the difference between the films. And the audience already knows what I'm going to say, and I'm going to say it anyway. Michael Jordan, the guy has charisma. He has personality. If nothing else, even when he doesn't talk, he just has this great smile as he's sitting there watching the Looney Tunes be Looney Tunes. And that carries so much weight in the film. I was really okay, let me start over. About 15 years ago, LeBron James was on SNL. There's this great skit with Jason Sudeikis, and it has the very famous now line where he goes, LeBron, he throws a book at LeBron James, and LeBron James is like, yo, what the hell is this? And he's like, it's a book. And it's hilarious. But the SNL skit was showing us how LeBron James just is not an actor. And he just does not have that personality and charisma, which not all, superstar athletes do, which is why Peyton Manning is in so many damn commercials, because, he's got a lot of charisma, he's got a lot of personality, and he can do it in ways that, others can't. And Michael Jordan brings so much more life to that character than LeBron James does. And in my opinion, that's the difference right there. If we saw this same movie and we swapped out LeBron James in the 1996 one and Michael Jordan in the 2021 one, I would think the 2021 would probably be a better movie. And that just is because of the Jordan X factor. What do you think?
Honestly, I don't think it's as big of a gap necessarily as like you're implying. I think LeBron, obviously, just like Michael Jordan, they're playing themselves clearly, right? They've never acted in anything other, LeBron's acted in a few things, but again, it was like Trainwreck, but he was still playing himself.
Mm-hmm.
Like they've been in commercials and different stuff, but at the end of the day, right, they're not like, huge dramatic actors or anything like that. And I don't think that's necessarily what anybody's expectations are when they go to it. No, granted, I do have to give the nod here to Michael Jordan. Like you, I think there was a little bit more like a smile on his face, and maybe that's because Michael Jordan was there to help the Looney Tunes, where LeBron's trying to get back his son. So the character he's playing is much more worried. But I actually thought LeBron did really good, especially considering the shoes he has to fill, which they're Jordans. I thought he did like really good. I'm not going to hate on it at all. I mean, I think we all know what type of performance we were expecting. It was not bad. It's kind of par for the course. I was like, this is like what I thought it might be. And, I always felt the same way about Jordan, where I was like, there's not a whole lot here other than, like you said, there's a little bit more, I guess a little bit more just energy with like the Looney Tunes and some of the stuff. But no, I thought LeBron did fine. So, I mean, it would be hard for me. Like I said, once you factor in the nostalgia factor and all this different stuff, it's hard for me to really go with the new one over
Let me
the old
just
one.
interrupt right there. Audience, what you're hearing is a diehard Lakers fan married to an even more diehard Lakers fan, not wanting to shit all over, his favorite Laker, new favorite.
No, I mean, I've been a LeBron James fan, long time. I've watched him play basketball, followed his career, all that stuff. I don't know. I've always liked LeBron James. Maybe that first year when he was with the Heat, maybe not so much. But I mean, it's funny because even the movie acknowledges that. Like they have another. I think the second best joke was, his son is talking to Algie Rhythm, and he's like, "Hey, where's my dad?" And he's like, "Oh, he's gone." It's kind of his MO. He went from, Cleveland to Miami, back to Cleveland, then to LA. He's kind of like, that's his thing. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously I think it's, clear cut. I don't know that I even need to really ask you, but I mean, which one did it better?
Well, I'm going to say Space Jam: A New Legacy. No, screw that. This is the one that did it better. The 1996 one. Don't even, if you have HBO Max, you're like, oh, should I watch Space Jam 2 or should I watch Space Jam 1? Just watch Space Jam 1. Don't put yourself through the pain of watching Space Jam 2. Definitely do not go shell out $13 to go see it at a movie theater like some stupid people did. Just watch this. It's on HBO, it's on Vudu, it's on Hulu, it's on everywhere. Pull out the VHS. You probably have it under your bed still. Watch that. You will be much happier.
Yeah, I think, when I give the things that I'm giving the nods to are, certain things like the new one can't compete with, like 90s nostalgia. And then I love the way the original one kind of incorporates Michael's baseball, like his kind of real life dilemma that he was going through at the time.
Now, do you know when this film was written kind of in conjunction to that actual incident?
I mean, it had to be almost in conjunction with it. Because I'm assuming this doesn't get greenlit without Michael Jordan's participation. And 1996 is around the time that he returned to the Bulls. That was when I think they won in 96, 97, 98. So he was, he came back in like 95 and they lost to the Magic. But somewhere in those like year and a half was when he was playing baseball. So it had to line up somewhere around then. So they had to film it, probably between seasons. So, but if I had to give my nods, I would give it to the 90s nostalgia factor. I think the soundtrack was better in the original one. And I don't know. Yeah, I think I liked maybe the Looney Tunes a little bit more. But the new one, I would go the opposite route you went, where if I had to pick which one did it better, I'm going to go with the original. That's the one I grew up with. That's the one that I love. But I actually would, if you were a fan of the original or you have kids, I would recommend the new one. I think kids will enjoy it. I think if parents like the original, if you go into it with a mindset of not trying to figure out just which one destroyed the other one, and you can kind of enjoy that we got a new version for 2021, almost, what is that, like 30 years later or something, then I think you could enjoy it.
I'm going to disagree. And let me put it this way. If you if you're like a Miami fan or Cleveland fan and you hate that LeBron James like betrayed your team, you'll hate him even more. And if you're like a regular basketball fan and you like LeBron James, or you don't have an opinion towards him anyway, you're going to hate him because he sucks and he ruined Space Jam.
No, I just have to disagree. I surprisingly like the movie. I laughed quite a few times. Like I said, I liked the father-son dynamic to the story because it wasn't a carbon copy reboot of just LeBron going to save the Looney Tunes. And I loved, like you said, the references to all the Warner Brothers properties and movies and that kind of whole meta element to what they were doing in the new one. So all of that, I really enjoyed. And yeah, I would say I liked the movie. I surprisingly more than I thought I was going to.
Well, I'll just end it on this note. The director of the original Space Jam, John Flicka, who has apparently won more Directors Guild awards than any other filmmaker for his commercial work. So he's more
that's
credible
crazy.
than Dustin and I. He said he could not stand Space Jam 2. And he said he had to try 5 times to make it all the way through. So listen, if an expert of that caliber hates the movie, then you should hate it too. And just don't even bother watching it because I think you'll regret it.
I don't know. This is one where I would really like to hear what our listeners' thoughts are because, this debate is going to, like I said, it's going to happen this weekend when everybody goes to meet up with their friends or they have a baby shower or they have, a birthday or something. This is like going to come up. People are going to talk about it. And yeah, at the end of the day, I just don't think the new one fails miserably. I think as far as trying to live up to the legacy of the original, it's a high bar just because of, that cult following it has. But at the end of the day, you know, you look at the original Space Jam, you look at kind of the story and this and that. I mean, Space Jam itself is not like this amazing film. It's just that if you can accept what they're trying to do, you can have a lot of fun while you're watching it. And I feel like the new one is the same way. Like if you can just kind of accept that, you know, this whole concept is kind of ridiculous and over the top, but you just go into it with a mindset that you're not actually going to see all the classics that they reference from Warner Brothers. What you're going to see is, you know, them trying to have fun in that Space Jam world. I think you can have fun too. So
listen, you know what D-Man thinks, you know what I think. Let us know on social media who you think's right. Hit me up at NDCal5, hit him up at Big Kid D-Man, and hit up our show at Film Comp Podcast. You can find us on social media. As D-Man says every week, you can look us up on Google, Filmmakers Compass. You can visit our website, filmmakerscompass.com. Listen to more episodes, subscribe to the show. I think it's also important to say, hey, shout out to Don Cheadle in a totally different role than he normally does. And hey, he even stuffed LeBron James a few times on the basketball court. So, you know, that's definitely a notch.
Yeah, I always want to give a nod to actors. You know, hey, here's Don Cheadle taking this role. And you know what? He just looked like he was having fun with it. He's like, yeah, I'm going to own it and just have as much fun as I can. And I have a lot of respect. I'm like, hey, you know, that's awesome.
It was awesome. Next week, you know, this weekend, we should say, the G.I. Joe Snake Eyes movie is coming out. So we decided to take a step back. We're going to watch the original G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra from 2009 and G.I. Joe Retaliation from 2013. We hope that you guys will tune in to join that conversation as well.
So thank you all so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll be back next week with a new episode.